nutrition stores. And I learned quite a lot about natural health.
Uh,
Personally, I have not
Mr.
been.
Roguski, I'm sorry to cut you. I think it is live. Okay, so I'm going to have to go ahead and
It is live.
it is live.
Yes.
Okay, all right. My apologies there.
No,
Let's
no
continue.
problem.
Let's
Okay.
continue. All right.
Hopefully everybody heard that. I won't repeat it.
Right.
And personally, I'm 64 years old, and I have not been to a medical doctor since I was 19. And you could not pay me to go. You might have got a clue from that by the title of my book, Your Doctor is a Liar. Okay.
Right.
I have personally witnessed people who have horrific skin problems. And when they do certain types of liver and gallbladder cleanse or a digestive system cleanse, the skin problems magically disappear. I've personally experienced issues with teeth that when I had a bad tooth crack off and come out, and a decade old skin problem on my ankle disappeared. Okay. So when you see people who have issues of toxicity and you see it manifest as skin issues or internal toxicity, and your doctor says, oh, it's due to a virus. Okay. Well, if they could take a sample of some fluid or substance from your body and put it under an electron microscope and show you the virus, and then take another sample and give it to the person next to you, rub it on their skin or make them breathe it, or in their nose or their mouth, and then that person gets the very same disease, maybe you would then believe that. But what I feel people are being told is a story. It's a very well crafted, very old, very convincing story to those who don't know any better. But I don't believe a word of it. And so when people say Mpox, what I hear is moneypox. What you're dealing with is part of the system to quote unquote test people, to tell them that they have something that only this magical test can reveal. And it's almost 3 weeks ago now, on August 7th, I published an article that I put a lot of research into to try to make it simple for people. It's called PCRfraud.com. Anyone claiming that they can tell you that you have a disease or that they've identified some virion that's causing or could cause disease and be transmissible from you to the next person is lying. And the WHO is at the head of that because their definition of a proven case of Mpox is that there's a positive PCR result. It is not a test, and I'm glad I'm getting some chuckles from Fred, because he knows that this is all BS. Now, when you hear other people say that, the line, oh, Mpox is a virus and you can get it by fomites that, if someone's scabs, dried tissue was on their bedding, or, you have bodily contact, or men who have sex with men, or any one of all of these other many, many stories, you're falling for a story. Maybe it's true, but how could they possibly prove it? It's all propaganda. And what we're dealing with in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is surprising, I think, to many people. I live in California, and I must admit it was actually surprising to me, even though I kind of had an inkling. The Democratic Republic of Congo is 6 times as large, geographical area as California. And it's got almost 3 times as many people. There's 110 million people in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We're talking about 500 deaths. More people than that by far in the Congo die from tuberculosis and malaria and heart disease and cancer and all this sort of stuff. What we're dealing with is a just maladjusted focus on things that are meant to scare people. If what they really wanted to do was improve the health of people, they would be talking about the war in eastern Congo and the tens of thousands of displaced people who are living in encampments and are not being nourished properly. They're under a lot of stress. This is not what the media is saying. I could certainly repeat all of the talking points and the propaganda, but I encourage everybody to ask questions. What happens to toxins in your body when your liver and your gallbladder and your digestive system and your lymphatics and your immune system are on overload? Well, your body tries to throw them out your skin, and so you see skin problems. And if doctors treat the dysfunctional liver and kidneys and gallbladder and digestive tract, people's skin, magically clears up, and teeth are an additional aspect of that as well. I think I've taken up more than my allotted time, so I'll give the floor back over to you and Fred.
Okay, I want to have a follow-up question for you, but I guess we can crunch it. Okay, so we're gonna frame it as you said. So we're looking at several concepts. We're looking at concepts where we are proposing, we're expecting that the people who are reporting this to us are experts in the field or should be experts in the field, right? So we're talking about a disease that initiated and originated animals to humans, homosexual males, and so on. What this part of the story, why?
Well, I'm old enough. I don't know about you, Kevin, but I remember the same story for HIV and AIDS, almost to a T. Different part of the world, maybe, but the issue is the disconnect between visible symptoms and cause. Just because somebody says your symptoms are caused by such and such a problem. Long story short, I won't bore you with the details, but just yesterday I had an issue where I was witnessing something happening, and I thought I had identified the cause, but it was actually caused by something totally, totally different. Okay. To put it into reality, we just had a lot of plumbing work done on our house. It's a 100-year-old home, and we got all new plumbing. And one of the drains, I thought the drain was leaking, but it was actually a supply pipe that was leaking, and it was dripping down onto the drain. Well, I was looking at the drain, and it was all wet, and I had just taken a shower, and I thought, oh, the drain is leaking. But it wasn't. There was something else that was causing me to believe that I had identified the cause of the problem. We did a little more things to figure out what was really going on, and we solved the actual problem. Until you identify the true cause of the problem, you're never going to solve it. And so as long as the powers that be can make you afraid of something and claim that the solution is to inject an unknown substance into your body to, quite frankly, make you even more ill. Last time I checked the Jynneos vaccine, it was 1.3% of people who are injected have severe adverse events, cardiovascular problems. Well, if they were to inject, I won't say vaccinate, but inject 110 million people in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, you'd have 1.3 million people or more with cardiovascular problems. That would be really good for the pharmaceutical hospital emergency industrial complex's bottom line. Get everybody afraid of a problem that has killed maybe 500 people, if you believe their statistics, and turn it into an enormous problem.
Fred, your angle? Story, what is your angle?
Well, thank you very much, James, for putting that into perfect context. And the situation that you have to remember is that the World Health Organization has once again managed to deceive the global public, or the court of public opinion,
Mhm.
and has deceived the court of public opinion by doing the following. There is no such thing as 500 deaths in the Republic of Congo. What they did is that they took 37 independent agencies to report on 80 cases and 37 deaths, and came up with the 500 number because 37 operations were reporting on the same set of circumstances. And then they compiled and combined the numbers. That's how they created the fraud. That's precisely what they did in COVID 19, remember? It's the same playbook all over again. In addition to that, why is it that the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda and Rwanda are the three countries which this Mpox has mysteriously surfaced after it was declared no longer a public health or, or a global public health emergency by the WHO in 2023? You know, it's on record. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus comes to the world stage and says, I have taken the decision that Mpox or monkeypox is no longer a public health emergency of international concern. That was in July 11th, 2023. So why is it that all of a sudden these three African countries have a breakout of monkeypox? You want to know why? In 2019, the World Health Organization, along with funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, authorized a dengue fever vaccine for those three countries. And the monkeypox strain, the genome, was included in the formulation. All right.
Okay,
In addition to that, you
go
then
ahead.
have, in addition to that, when the monkeypox strain was included in the formulation of the COVID 19 biological weapon injections, the dengue fever vaccine that was issued in 2019 was actually a COVID 19 vaccine, which they were trialing in Africa under the pretext of a dengue fever vaccine. The first use of COVID 19 vaccines took place in Rwanda, Uganda, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, because the COVID 19 vaccines were actually under manufactured from 2016. Moderna has the documents to prove it. So don't come and tell me that all of a sudden this is some new disease. That is utter nonsense. Okay, we know what the facts are. We know that they're lying. They know that we know they're lying, and they don't care that we know that they're lying. But the most important thing that we know is that we're not complying with the foolishness that they want to bring to us. We will not comply. Do not, under any circumstances, believe that you are going to bring that nonsense into the Caribbean region, specifically Jamaica, and try to get people to believe that your nonsense has taken a different direction, because we are not going to comply. Okay?
All right. Thank you for that, Fred. Okay. Okay. Let's examine this now. So we're fighting here. Global health emergency or not? Global health emergency. All right. So if we are continuing with the framing of all of this being a story, there are questions that we have to answer. You mentioned 37 to 500. One of my first questions would be how how do they get away with this? Another question would be, we're talking about data that says from the World Health Organization 90%, 96% of the cases are out of Congo. And so little questions are raised. Why Congo? Why these countries? Why are these countries the originator of this storied disease that we're calling Mpox? And how
Well,
do
you
they
have
get away with these numbers? Explain to our viewers.
well, the reason that they get away with the viewers is that you have to understand the compromise of the Africa CDC. The Africa CDC is the most compromised medical institution after the World Health Organization. And every single one of the compromised countries are members of ECOWAS, which is the Economic Community of West African States. And ECOWAS hosts the African CDC. And the African CDC has a plethora of humanitarian agencies that are focused on the Democratic Republic of Congo, simply because the Congo has been the country where the most natural resources have been exploited for the longest period of time. And they have all focused all of their pharmaceutical bioexperiments in that particular region. In addition to that, one of the most important things we have to remember is that when the Africa CDC decides to do a survey in Africa, the surveys are constantly using funds from corruption organizations. In other words, you have BlackRock maybe investing in a mining operation in a certain area of the Congo, but they can't get the cooperation because there are certain agencies in place that will be questioning the activities of the mining operation or some such activity. So what do? They actually pay to have a pandemic or an epidemic breakout, and all of the foreigners magically disappear like pigeons from when a cat is let loose amongst them. And the Africa CDC complies by putting their team on the ground, which knows expert knowledge of how to manipulate numbers and set up tents and make look as if something is happening and so on, and then issue fraudulent reports. The reason I am saying all of this is because I've been there and watched it happen. I've been there and watched it happen. Not only in the African Congo, but in Mali, in Niger, in Tanzania, in Kenya, in Somalia, Eritrea. Every single one of them have the exact same modus operandi. The entire Africa CDC is responsible for the fraud that is then put forward as a report to the World Health Organization. Why is it that the African CDC declared monkeypox as a medical emergency of international concern one day before the World Health Organization did so? So why are we not following the instructions of the Africa CDC? Why are we following the World Health Organization?
Right.
Come on. Logical common sense. But when you see this thing actually happening on the ground, where you are in a capacity as a facilitator of humanitarian aid, and you're there thinking that you are providing humanitarian aid, at the same time you are being complicit and acting in a fraudulent capacity because you are part of the fraud and you get sucked into the whole humanitarian narrative. Oh my goodness, this is so terrible, and so on and so forth. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and about to open a museum.
All right, James, I want you to, okay, so we get the idea there are things happening with my body. So something's happening with my body and so forth and so forth. And so we probably idea that this, what is believed or known to be, it's all a story. Okay, so the story says that it's spreading rapidly in Africa. There are cases in Europe and cases in Asia, and they're producing similarities of these symptoms and these things that are happening to mass people. Simplify it for our viewers. If Mpox is a story and it's not real, what exactly is spreading? And is it that it's just simply a story, or is it that there's something else that's being done to the bodies of human beings to carry out the narrative of this story?
Well, one of the things I don't do is speculate. And so I try to stick to the facts that I know, that I can verify. Okay. And so what I think is really going on is embedded in the negotiations that are going to be kicking back in on September 9th to the 20th for the quote unquote pandemic agreement. What they are saying is in direct alignment with what these negotiations are trying to accomplish. Over the last 4.5 to 5 years with COVID, what I learned, and what Fred already knew, right, and I knew most of it, and you know, maybe Kevin, you learned, and maybe a lot of your audience learned, is that the public health measures, the lockdowns, the travel restrictions, the social distancing, the wearing the mask, the wiping down your shopping cart before you go into the grocery store, all of these many things. And, the masks and the tests, which, everyone should never even use the phrase PCR test. It's kind of like saying COVID vaccine. The response should be, hold on, it's not a vaccine. Hold on, it's not a test. It's a fraud. They're manipulating the language, along with the drugs like remdesivir and utilizing ventilators for a respiratory problem. All of those things that I questioned, from the outset and continue to do so. Not one word has ever been spoken or written in any of the documents that I've seen over the last 2.5 years calling any of that into question. They're not saying, oh, what did we do wrong? What could we do better? Did this work? Did that not work? What should we have done? Now that Robert F. Kennedy has left the race for president, it's not really political for me to say one of the things that he said, and I think the very first town hall that he conducted, they asked him, what would you have done with COVID? And he said what I thought was a great answer. He said that we should spend a couple of $1 million to build a sort of social media communications platform. And all of the medical doctors in the entire world should have access to put in case information. You can make it anonymous. You don't have to tell the person's name and all that sort of thing. But you put in, anonymized data, and everyone in the world could see the data, and all of the doctors could obviously see what other doctors are doing. And very soon, with data analysis or artificial intelligence analysis of the data, you would see that, oh, this doctor in that country and that doctor in that country, they did things that didn't work. Other doctors did things that did work, and the person got better much faster. They identified the problem, they solved it. And in short order, the effective measures would bubble up to the top, and you would have an answer that would make sense to use for people in something that's going on that you're not, you're afraid of. Okay? That would cost maybe a couple of $1 million to, write the software and implement that. A billionaire who owns a social media database management company could just, donate that to the world and do a great favor. But nobody wants to do that, because that would use things like nutrition or cleansing or essential medicines that are, pennies per dose. And it would wipe out the potential for enormous profits for quote unquote vaccines, or, many billionaires were made just from the testing. Okay. And so what I think we are seeing is a theatrical production. Sure, some people are ill and they're taking photographs of those people and they're testing them and they're doing all these things. But it's a theatrical production. All you have to do is watch as many video clips as I have watched to see that somebody videotaped one man sitting in a chair with horrible pustules all over his body. And somebody else, took a video of a woman taking the shirt off her son's back to show the rash that he has. And another woman had her baby on a bed in a little tent hospital. And it was repeated over and over. The Mockingbird media just repeating the same horrific video clips, to get it into people's mind that they have to be afraid of yet another something, and that the problem can be solved if we only had a pandemic agreement where investment would go to the Congo and Uganda and Rwanda and Burundi and everywhere else, so that they would have the manufacturing capacity to make hundreds of millions of jabs and tests and drugs to poison people locally and profit from it locally, rather than have all of that money go to Pfizer and Moderna and the Western countries. The oligarchs in those nations want their piece of the pie. So this is a theatrical production being put on by the mainstream media, being regurgitated by the vast majority of the alternative media to basically feed the beast of the pharmaceutical, hospital, emergency, industrial complex. Now, I don't know if I answered your question. I honestly don't remember your question. If I didn't answer it, and you remember your question, I'll take another crack at it. But that's
No,
what
without a
I
doubt,
think.
without a doubt, obviously, obviously the question was centered around, what exactly because we're sticking with the idea of the story. So what exactly really is spreading? So okay, so you mentioned a couple things there, and one of is the idea of profiteering. So in sticking with the concept of the story, what is the real motive here? Is it mainly profiteering? Is there something else? Obviously, we don't want to launch a conspiracy broadcast now, but what is the real motive?
Well, I usually do not speculate on any individual person's motive. Okay, if you're dealing with people who are, health care providers who are dealing with people in these areas, Fred said he'd been involved in that kind of aid situation. In many ways, they are more deeply indoctrinated than anybody. They've been through the medical establishment. They've been indoctrinated. And so they probably believe all of the propaganda. They're not skilled in natural healing to help people with inexpensive herbs and procedures and dealing with the infrastructure problems of not having good nutrition or good clean water, and dealing with stress levels of being displaced from your home due to some type of conflict. And so there's a lot of people whose intent is good and pure and meaningful. They've just been misinformed and they believe the propaganda. And you have to get, I think, a couple of levels removed to where you see, well, wait a minute. How can you possibly believe that injecting an unknown substance into your body that is known to cause, in 1.3% of the people who receive it, severe adverse events to the cardiovascular system? How in the world can you approve that unless you are just oozing with evil? I mean, you have to be some kind of stupid or some kind of evil, and maybe a little bit of both.
Interesting. Fred, your take?
Well, I totally agree with everything that James has said because he's hitting the nails on the head and so on. But we also have to realize that you asked the question: Is this about the money or is this about the disease? Well, this is actually about the money, because the vaccine company Jynneos never was an operational company that made any kind of profit on anything until this whole monkeypox thing blew up. But then we have to look back at who are the investment teams behind Jynneos. The same BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, they're all investors. In addition to that, one of the most important things you have to remember with regard to the formulation of the Jynneos vaccine for monkeypox that they're now purchasing, and countries around the world have pre-purchased this Jynneos vaccine, is that it contains a deadly toxin in the form of an antibiotic known as ciprofloxacin. This creates massive neurological as well as pulmonary disorder in human beings. This is about making money and having the victims pay for it. In other words, you are paying to be assassinated. This is all part of the global agenda of depopulation on an industrial scale. And nobody can tell me any different. And there's no one that can come onto this show right now and disprove what I'm saying, because the evidence speaks for itself. Okay? So if there's anyone that would like to join the show now to disprove what I am saying, then please do so, because we can have a very, very vibrant conversation and present the evidence to prove that what they may be thinking is incorrect. And the evidence proves that what we are saying is the correct thing that the people should listen to. Because at the end of the day, the World Health Organization, the CDC, the Africa CDC, the FDA, and all the rest of the other fraudulent or criminally fraudulent organizations are continuing to push and to put the propaganda out there, which mirrors the entire COVID-19 criminal fraud that was put onto the unsuspecting public in 2020. The years and the decades of planning are coming to fruition for them. They believe that it's coming to fruition for them. What they fail to realize is that the global environment of truth, knowledge, and education, is actually winning the day. Truth, knowledge, and education, where the truth of the facts are coming out, the education of the public is ongoing, the Great Awakening is well underway, and the knowledge that is being globally disseminated into that Great Awakening so that the truth can be revealed is what we are going to win this war with.
If I can add, go ahead.
Go ahead, James.
If I can add just a little bit, my experience managing an herb, nutrition, homeopathic, aromatherapy store, I dealt with many companies who produced a variety of products, and not all of them, but many of them would have stacks and stacks of documentation where every batch of every product that they manufactured, they would take a sample, send it off to an independent laboratory to verify that the ingredients that they claimed were in their product were actually in their product, and there weren't any heavy metals or fungus or toxins, bacterial infection, and that sort of thing. And so the shipment would show up with a report from an independent laboratory having done an analysis on the product. Okay. Well, we did not see that with the COVID vaccines. In fact, we don't see that with any vaccine. So I live in Glendale, California. I'm about 20 minutes from downtown Los Angeles. And there's an area in Los Angeles that's relatively famous, or infamous, I should say, called Skid Row. It's like the worst part of town. Okay?
I know it.
Okay. And so I would venture to say that you might be safe to go to Skid Row in the middle of the night and roll up your sleeve and ask some stranger if they have a hypodermic needle filled with some substances that they could inject into your arm, because you could do that, or you could go to the local pharmacy and ask the farm tech to inject something into your arm. And I would venture to guess there's not a single person watching this presentation who has the foggiest idea of what is actually in the injections. Now, Fred mentioned Cipro being in the, was it the monkeypox injection? No, it was the, okay, I think you're muted.
Yeah, Cipro is in the monkeypox injection. Okay. That's the basis of the Jynneos injection.
There have been many people who have obtained the COVID vaccines and done various analyses of them, even though, to my understanding, that's technically against the law. The law in the United States, at least, is such that no one is supposed to actually do an analysis of what is in these substances. How anyone, especially with children and infants, but how anyone could ever possibly allow some other person to inject the substance into their body without having complete and full disclosure from an independent laboratory what was in that product, and be informed about all of the side effects that it might cause before you allowed them to do that to you, is astonishing. But I believe about 5.5 billion people around the world allowed that to happen. And until those people wise up and learn that it is their right and their personal responsibility to say no, the propaganda is going to keep convincing people that they should allow strangers to inject unknown substances into their body because, it's going to help protect you from an invisible, non-existent boogeyman.
Okay, absolutely correct.
You made interesting points, and we want to get back to that. But let me introduce Dr. Michael Harvey, who has just joined us. Dr. Harvey, Thank you for joining us. So far, we've been discussing the Mpox disease, and so far we're at an angle where we're seeing it as a story. We're seeing it as there's been a lot of fabrications and so on. But let's get your feed, Dr. Harvey. Mpox, your take on it.
Unmute, Dr. Harvey. Unmute.
You're yes.
Thank you. You look at the pictures of Mpox, and I did send out by email. I hope everybody got a chance to see it about 4 days ago. A slide showing Mpox with the blisters all over the guy's hand, and that same exact picture next to it identified as shingles. Mpox is shingles, and it's a common side effect of the COVID.
Bad internet connection.
Yes, I was just. It was on my end alone. Are you guys hearing Dr. Harvey? No.
No. One of the side effects listed for the Pfizer jab was autoimmune blistering syndrome. And so years ago, I had a conversation with the gentleman who had just gotten, his COVID jab, and he was shocked that, he had a case of the shingles come back after decades. I think Dr. Michael's back.
Yeah. We weren't hearing you for a second there.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there.
Yeah. Can you
Right,
can go
so
on. Go ahead.
The level of fraud in so-called healthcare today, it's becoming so transparent, only the blind cannot see. It's almost like they're rubbing our noses and say, yeah, we're going to line you all up and kill you with hypodermic needles. What are you going to do about it? We're telling you we're going to do it to you, and you fools are a bunch of cowards, and you're not standing up to us. And it's time all of us decide on an individual basis to show these people who we are. We will not be genocided by pharma and the monsters who own this planet. We will not go down to these people.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Harvey. Okay, gentlemen, I want an issue here. Okay, so we talk about the idea of, as it's coined, plandemic. We spoke of the narrative that is bent on a story. Pandemics in general, whether that be 100 centuries ago. What are pandemics? What constitutes? Are they real? Have they ever happened? What is it? And if you want to briefly, bring to our viewers the idea of what happened during COVID explanation. Dr. Harvey, you go ahead. You unmute your mic and go ahead.
Yes, there are no pandemics. There have never been any pandemics. They like to use the Spanish flu of 1917 that killed 70 million people. But when you go back and look at the truth that happened, those 70 million people died from the vaccines. And again, it was covered up by the Rockefeller Foundation, the same criminal enterprise that's running the COVID and the monkeypox thing. These people are the most diabolical monsters on the face of the earth. There's two family names that have to go, Rothschild and Rockefeller. These people have to be removed from this planet. You want to be a humanitarian, put them on a spaceship and send them to the moon.
Thank you for that. Okay, so another follow-up question, and James, you can respond if you want first. Okay, so we got all these symptoms in our bodies. We're told COVID was airborne, Mpox, skin to closed, and so forth, being in close contact to people who have the supposed disease and so forth. So then my next question is, because we're trying to make our viewers understand what's going on here. So are we establishing that these proclaims, these are common illnesses, or floaters from COVID-19 or from other sorts of disease that could be common, but yet have been escalated to mean something else beyond what they really are? Are we establishing that?
Well, let me try to answer that question in this fashion. I don't know if you know of a gentleman by the name of J.J. Couey, but one of his presentations talks about how the use of the PCR process is so deeply flawed. And if you go back to PCRfraud.com and you look at the original details that came out of the Corman Drosten paper to start utilizing the PCR process fraudulently as a test, initially they said, oh, they were going to check for 3 genetic sequences. And then maybe a month or so after that, they said, no, let's just check for 2. And then, no, just let's check for 1. And the one that was primarily used would just find background coronavirus, not necessarily the specific one that was being blamed as being a novel case. So arguably, positive tests, and you have to, I'm using that term hesitantly because it's completely fraudulent, but the tests created a problem out of the imagination. If you can measure something that's just floating around, but doesn't cause the problem that you're claiming that it causes, and you find a tiny little piece of it, and then you claim that that is why a totally healthy person has an asymptomatic case of a deadly disease, and people believe that, what you're dealing with is what I call, the World Hypnosis Organization. They're very good at telling a story that people believe. And I want to put this in the proper context because WHO is really good at telling stories and concocting data and information and presenting it to the world, but they don't really have any authority. They don't have any lawful authority to do anything other than spew their propaganda. The problem are the local officials, okay? Your school board, your city council, by whatever name it may be, your state, your province, your county health board, your employer, okay, your shopkeeper, whatever it may be, they believe the propaganda. And they are the ones who then attempt to enforce some restriction on your freedom. And they simply, number one, they don't know how they've been bamboozled. And number two, in the vast majority of cases, they don't actually have any lawful authority to make you do anything to your body. But because of the language and the way it's manipulated, people believe that it's their obligation to do what some authority says, simply because they don't actually know the truth. They only know the propaganda.
Right. Okay. So, Fred, fabricated numbers or not, symptoms of the body, cases being stated, cases of death being stated, are people actually dying from these proclaimed diseases?
Are you talking about Mpox or are you talking about the
Mpox,
diseases?
COVID-19,
Right. Well,
all of the planned
I think the predominant evidence or the global burden of proof at this point in time points directly to direct association to COVID-19 vaccination or inoculation. And Dr. Peter McCulloch has outlined very clearly, as well as 70 other leading physicians around the world, including many others that have carried out the research and proven that the direct causal relationship to death has been the COVID-19 biological weapon injections. This is a global depopulation agenda on an industrial scale. And there's, once again, if there's anyone that would like to join the show and challenge this finding, then feel free to do so. Because at the end of the day, there is not a single shred of evidence that can be produced by the World Health Organization, the CDC, the Africa CDC, or any other non-elected three-letter government or non-governmental organization that can prove to the world that the death rates that we're seeing around the world is not related to COVID-19, biological weapon injections, simply because the official figures stand at 2.6 billion dead right now. Okay? And
Right.
counting, and counting. So for someone to say, oh, well, my family member didn't die of was not vaccinated, and he didn't die of a COVID-19 injection because he was not vaccinated. Okay, we accept that he wasn't vaccinated, but he was married to a vaccinated individual and he was having sexual relationships with that vaccinated individual, and thereby was infected through cross contamination and shedding, and died as a result of contracting the exact same toxins that his vaccinated partner are infected with. And they keep saying this over and over again here in Barbados and across the region. If you are in a marriage relationship or a sexual relationship with a vaccinated individual who has received one or more COVID-19 biological weapon injections, you will be infected with the exact same level of toxicity. And the reason that that is happening is because of this. The COVID-19 biological weapon injections are made up of nanoscale self-assembling technology on the one hand, and a lipid nanoparticle carrier on the other. The lipid nanoparticle carrier has a spike protein inserted into it that is then used when it gets into the body. The lipid nanoparticle discharges the protein into the cell and reprograms that cell to program the production of the the spike protein. Your body effectively becomes a spike protein manufacturing operation, cell by cell by cell by cell, and ongoing. This is the reason why the toxicity or the viral load takes a certain number of weeks to get to its full expression, where shedding now becomes the predominant case of person to person or trans infection. And this was first realized and proven by the pesticide control industry, not the pharmaceutical industry. This idea of shedding and trans infection was actually perfected by the pesticide control industry. Monsanto and 3M and these companies that are involved in the pesticide manufacturing industry, because they realized that they could manufacture a pesticide in powder or liquid form, which when it was placed on the surface, the pesticides the pest such as a termite or cockroaches and so on would walk over the pesticide and would take it back to a colony, and through the same process of shedding and transinfection would infect the entire colony, and the entire colony would be wiped out. The COVID-19 biological weapon injections operate on precisely that principle. You can inject a community of 300 people. You can take 50 of those people and inject them with a COVID-19 biological weapon. In 18 months' time, if you have the correct level of social interaction, all 300 people will be infected. This is the reality that we're facing right now. We are seeing massive unvaccinated people, or numbers of unvaccinated people, becoming seriously ill with the exact same symptoms as vaccinated individuals. And I am speaking from personal experience because my cousin is currently in the hospital here in Barbados with 4 brain tumors because of sexual relationships with his girlfriend, who is double vaccinated with Pfizer and a Moderna booster. And she's walking around like if nothing's happened, but he's in intensive care in the hospital with 4 brain tumors. Are people dying? Yes, they are, at an unprecedented rate. And just look at Portugal. Portugal has a 98% population vaccine uptake. They have just recorded 1,000 deaths per week in Portugal. 1,000 per week. There are entire communities in Portugal that are no longer inhabited because everyone in the community is dead. And it's accelerating. Barbados at one point was recording 119 people dying a week in a little island of 280,000 people. Our population is now down to 261,000. We still got a long way to go, because guess what? 62% of Barbadians are vaccinated with COVID-19 biological weapons. The dying has only just begun. It's only just begun. It's going to accelerate through 2025 like you would not believe. And I said this in 2022. The Caribbean region is facing its single greatest humanitarian disaster in its entire history if we do not manage to halt the biomedical, pharmaceutical, criminal fraud that is happening right now, ongoing, where hospitals are incentivized to inject patients, where doctors are incentivized to give people COVID-19 biological weapon injections, and nurses and orderlies are paid to do so. That is happening in Barbados tonight.
Dr. Harvey, now, I mean, somewhat on my next question in terms of an answer, but if these vaccines are being manufactured with a motive, how successful have they been so far?
They've been quite successful because they control the narrative, they control governments, they control the media. Now, let me tell you something. I've been talking with my patients quite a bit more than ever now, working in my Kingston office over the summer months. And one of our patients is a long-standing member of the Jamaican Defense Force. I was discussing the problem with him. I said, "Do you see what's about to happen? They're saying COVID's back again. They're going to have us mask up. They're going to have us socially distance and get into compulsive hand washing again." And I said to my friend, my patient, I says, "You know what they're going to do, right? They're going to kill us all with these injections." He says, "I know." He says, "The military knows." Now, this gives us a little ray of hope because I said to him, I said, "Look, how are we going to fight back? All we have are pots and pans. We need you guys." So he's going to hook me up with Vice Admiral Gorman, who runs the Jamaican military. They're very, very good friends. It's a female now who runs our military. Her original title was, I guess that got a few changes to Vice Admiral, not much of a change. Okay, I had to throw that in there. But we're going to find out if this lady is ready for some women's empowerment. Putting it another way, come on, honey, show us you can stand up to Pete.
Well, that's certainly encouraging. I'll tell you that for sure.
I actually didn't hear the last part of it, but
he was saying that he was saying that the lady who is in charge of the Jamaica Defense Force is it's imperative that we get her attention in order to be able to bring some sort of solution to the situation and to sensitize the Jamaican military as well as the upper ranks of the police force into understanding that action needs to be taken. And a clear and definite warning needs to be communicated to every single leader of a Caribbean territory, from Belize in the north to Suriname in the south. This is not just a Jamaica problem. This is a regional problem.
Yeah, I don't think Jamaica have enough large enough of a population for it to be only a Jamaica problem. So you're right, it's regional and it's global.
It's regional, yeah,
as well. Right. So playing up on the idea of pandemics, playing up on its root word and so forth in terms of panic. I mean, and panicking. Like we're not living in an era in which, governments and authorities, they can be forceful and brutal and just get away with it that easily. So another method of warfare is one of psychology. So the idea of there's a pandemic and there's this and there's that and there are people that are dying and going to come to work if this or that, and we've been through it with COVID. And there are many demonstrations, many people who spoke out against all of the crazy that was happening. As you mentioned, Dr. Harvey, the media, they control, they have the power. But what really can people do about these pandemic or plandemics? The common man, woman, child in the streets.
Well, we have to do what's starting to happen on a greater and greater scale, but it's not big yet. We need more people like those of on this panel and in this room watching this program to go down the so-called proverbial rabbit hole and see what's going on. Now, a doctor that everyone needs to become familiar with is Dr. Samantha Bailey. Her and her husband, Dr. Mark Bailey, have shredded the germ theory of disease. Now, they agree there are such things as pathogens, but what we're being sold by pharma, which is Rockefeller medicine, you must never forget the identity of the source. It's the Rockefellers. Way back in 1912, the Rockefeller Foundation combined the natural practice of medicine with the pharmaceutical industry, giving us the tyranny we have today. And they've been using vaccines that just a few years later, they vaccinated the world for Bacillus meningococcus. It's called the Fort Riley virus. Well, that's a bacterial infection anyway. And killed 70 million people. And you look at the whole scene, if parents who have kids in school, vaccines, they would shut the schools down. Nobody will let their kids go. Have injected into their children. Right now here in Jamaica, our children are required to get 50 injections or they can't get an education. You talk about an extortion racket. In America, it's 84 injections. Now, my grown children in America, when I lived there so many decades ago, we had exemptions, right? My family joined the Universal Life Church. We had a religious exemption. And we only had one belief in our church. We didn't believe in vaccines. Isn't it stupid? You have to form a religion so you don't have to get injected with poison. But if it worked, that'd be fine. Most of these other countries have no provision for exemptions. Now, they control us. Remember, they control us with fear, right? Now, we don't have any type of weapons. We don't have any force of government to bring against them. But what scares the living bejesus out of people? One word, letters, NGER. Now, we got to get our people seriously riled up. So they're on the phone. They're calling these, I heard these so-called elected scum, these 63 parliamentarians and say, hey, you think you go tell your prime minister sign, we're angry, and you guys got to pack up and get the hell out of town. We got to put the heat on these people. So who's going to make the phone to go for the general and get her on our side, the admiral, and we got to start getting political scum here and put the fear of the Lord Jesus Christ into them, and they will back the bleep down. You got to get angry. You got to quit being polite. We're too damn polite in our job. Afraid to get angry. It might upset somebody. You're damn right it'll upset somebody. It'll upset the criminal government. It's time we shake these people in their boots.
All right. Okay. So, all right, let's take the government into consideration. So we're balancing several things here. We're looking at the idea of persons being isolated from society. We're looking at the idea of protective health versus human rights. And even when it comes to government and governance, global, what power really does the Jamaican government have in situations, or any country for that matter? Taking into consideration the idea of a global world and global cooperation.
Well, I think one of the most important things to remember is that the signing, I'm speaking specifically to the Caribbean right now.
Right.
The Caribbean region was incentivized to sign the 2005 International Health Regulations of the WHO in 2005. And enshrined in that document was the mechanism by which Westphalian national sovereignty could be suspended. In other words, the constitutional authority of every country could be brought to a halt with the inaction of a public health Emergency Powers Act. And that is precisely what happened in 2020 when each parliament across the Caribbean region, in lockstep with each other, their their attorney generals stood in Parliament and announced that a suspension of all businesses and the Emergency Powers Act would be brought into force to engage in lockdowns and closure of businesses and so on. That Emergency Powers Act suspended the constitutional authority of every single Caribbean country. And it has never been restored because the World Economic Forum and the United Nations collaborated together, and the World Health Organization collaborated together in order to make sure that the Westphalian national sovereignty was replaced by the global public-private partnership. Stakeholder capitalism is what rules the situation. And we're now under a rules-based authoritarian, totalitarian dictatorship. Well, guess what? We don't have to subscribe to that because there is no country and there's no unelected non-governmental organization that has the power to remove the authority of our constitutional integrity without the consent of the people. We, the people of the republic, we, the people of our sovereign national state. They have no power to do that. They can present the facts and they can pay the politicians to enforce the situation, which is precisely what you see happening across the Caribbean region. What we see happening across the Caribbean region is the rules being dictated to the crew in charge, such as here in Barbados, there is a crew in charge of the ship, the Admiralty law representation, where the crew follows the instructions that are given by the rules-based authoritarian edicts of the global public-private partnership, and we have unconstitutional regulations and policies put in place. They are not laws. They are not laws because there is no corporation of the Admiralty law system that has the power to make law because they are not operating under common or natural law sovereignty. They make regulations and policies. We must remember that. We're dealing with the corporation of Jamaica and we're dealing with the corporation of Barbados. We're dealing with the corporation of St. Lucia, Grenada, Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean region. Every single island and country that signed the World Health International Health Regulations had their constitution suspended upon the declaration of a public health emergency of international concern in COVID-19. And when the Emergency Powers Act were read and the first lockdown happened, that constitutional authority was suspended. 196 countries' constitutions ceased to work. The removal and eradication of Westphalian national sovereignty put in place by unelected organizations to which the world has found itself beholden through stakeholder capitalism, where corporations are now running the scene, not the will of the people through good governance and good management. The spiritual context of this is that you have fragmented the ability of people to draw on the spiritual power of uniting behind sovereignty and uniting on a footing that brings that power of sovereignty to the fore and says no more. That has been fragmented, but we can restore that simply by understanding precisely why the rule system or the rule-based system is operating, and by demanding that we sign, all of us sign the Bill of Sovereignty, our own civil Bill of Sovereignty, extricating ourselves from the Admiralty system. In Trinidad, the Prime Minister of Trinidad just actually signed a decree where he's going to change the coat of arms of Trinidad. He's going to change the coat of arms of Trinidad. What he has done, he has just set every single citizen of Trinidad and Tobago free. They're no longer part of the Admiralty law system, because once you change the coat of arms, you are disenfranchising the corporation from the parent corporation, which is the bank, the City of London. The City of London Corporation is the one that holds the overall corporate ward of the state of Trinidad and Tobago and of Barbados and of Jamaica. By changing the coat of arms, you have set the population of Trinidad and Tobago free. Every man, woman, and child in that country now has the right to pursue their own national sovereignty, and there is nothing that the government can do about it. We need to establish that precise same principle. The corporate ward of the state must be dispensed with, and where sovereignty and natural law and common law come into play is by every single one of us as sovereign nationals of the Caribbean standing up for what is righteous. Otherwise than that, we will be enslaved again and again and again, from one pandemic to the other, to the other, to the other. A continuing cycle of corporate criminal fraud.
Okay. Okay. So the WHO.
And Fred, do we know how they achieve that?
What are you talking about? This sovereign, your sovereign, or the Bill of Sovereign Rights?
Yeah. They figure out how to do it in Trinidad and Tobago. What do we have to do in Jamaica to throw the stupid coat of arms? If that's all we have to do, let's do it tomorrow morning. How do we do it?
Well, you maybe have to give Mr. Holness a couple of drinks and see if he's willing to change the coat of arms of Jamaica. Because once you change the coat of arms, you've dispensed with the corporate ward that holds you beholden to the City of London. And after that, you set your people free. You've set your people free. I don't think that when they realize what they've done, that the rest of the Caribbean leaders are going to do it, because they would have realized what they've done. But Keith Rowley just set every single man, woman, and child free in Jamaica. I mean, in Trinidad and Tobago. So Mr. Rowley needs to be incentivized. Mr. Holness needs to be incentivized with immediate effect to change the coat of arms in Jamaica, because that would have happened at the top, and the government itself would have taken the action. The government in Trinidad and Tobago itself has taken the action. Unknowingly, unwittingly, yes, but they have. And they have unwittingly set the people free from the corporate ward. Every man, woman, and child in Trinidad and Tobago is a free sovereign national. All they have to do is to seize the opportunity to have themselves extricated from the Admiralty law system with a sovereign Bill of Rights. That's it.
So, gentlemen, so now the WHO, they're careful to craft. They're careful to craft words such as recommendations and so on and so on. Being careful, as we mentioned before, not to trample upon sovereign nations' constitution and so forth. But we have a pandemic, or plandemic, or stories, and people claim to be dying, or they're dying, whichever the case is. And it's escalating, and so on and so on and so on. There's lockdown, there are recommendations or enforcements of masks and so forth. People are not allowed to go in work without them. Or the big one, you're not allowed to come to work without being vaccinated. From a legal standpoint, the individual, what are their rights? What is the right of to challenge these? James, you wanna take that on?
It was breaking
first?
up a little bit, but I think I heard the gist of the question, and so it's going to vary, depending upon where you are. If you subject yourself to be subservient to a corporation, and this is the core problem that I feel that the vast majority of people don't comprehend. You're given all of your human rights by your creator. We are here under an agreement that we have certain rights that societies agree amongst themselves that we share. When the people create a government, now I certainly am focused from a United States perspective, and other nations have different views on this, but when the people come together and give up some of their rights for the good of the collective to form a government and give certain limited powers to that government, that's a choice that the people make. In the United States, that happened on a state basis, and then the states came together and handed over 16 enumerated authorities to the federal government. The federal government does not have any authority over healthcare, period, end of story. If you go back to the states, at best, maybe a dozen states mention something about health in the state constitution. It might say something like, if the state has incarcerated, people have been convicted of a crime, then they're obligated to provide health care. But clearly, on 2/3 of the states, the Constitution says nothing about health care. The government has no authority. Well, governments typically create corporations. If you allow yourself to voluntarily subject yourself by agreeing to some terms of service with a corporation, or you agree that you want to get some benefit from that corporation, and that corporation may very well be your local government or some other, pseudo government entity. If you sign something and you agree to give up your rights in return for some benefits, you're changing your position from the top of the totem pole and putting yourself down on the bottom by signing away in some type of an agreement that you will now be subservient to a government or a corporation. So the first thing to understand is that, are you subjecting yourself to an authority by choice? Do you want your government benefits? Do you want to use some company's platform? Do you want to gain some benefit by signing away some of your freedoms? If you understand that you are the creator of government, and government is the creator of corporations, when you go and apply for a job, or you go and apply for some service for that corporation, you're putting yourself in that weaker position. Now, I would like to wrap up my view of what's going on in just a couple of minutes. What I think the biggest pandemic has been over the last 4 years, it's not COVID, it's not monkeypox, it's not any of that stuff. It has been the shattering of relationships between people. It used to be, and it should be again, that your family, your friends, your neighbors, your community, your associates at work or school or wherever you spend most of your time was where you went for support. And for the most part, that's been shattered. And so what I encourage people to do, it's not quite Christmas time yet, but if you can think about the Christmas story of, parents tell their children, well, you better behave. Santa Claus is watching. He's going to put you on the naughty list, right? Santa's got a list, kids that are nice, they're going to get Christmas presents. Kids that have been naughty, they're going to get a lump of coal or whatever. Well, look through your life and your family, your friends, your neighbors, and everyone else, and send them this video. Ask them to watch this video and ask them to give you their opinion of all of the things that we've said. They might say, hey, that guy made some sense. That guy's really riled up. That guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Who knows? Okay. Ask them what their opinion is about the situation, in your country. And based on what they say, decide whether they belong on your nice list or your naughty list, or maybe they're on a neutral list because they just haven't given it any thought. Okay. There's a saying, I don't think it's exactly correct. They say that 20% of the people do 80% of the work. I think it's more like 0.5% of the people do 99.5% of the work. Put your effort into the people who understand what the heck is going on. You'll have more power with the few people who are aware of the reality of the situation. If you want to try to save those who are still wearing masks and still signing up for boosters and looking to take the next, monkeypox jab, say a prayer for them, okay? Be nice and do everything you can to help them. But what we need to do is identify our allies. Identify the 0.5% of the people that you know who get it. Then you can think about how to organize those activists rather than try to wake up people who are, walking zombies, doing as they're told. They've had 4.5 years to figure this out. Another conversation with you isn't going to change it. If they respond to this video and they go, yes, what do we got to do? We got to go do something. Put them on the list of people to work with. And whatever you decide to do, that's going to be decided by the people in that group, not by me or anyone on this panel. They'll decide what makes sense on the ground with people who are ready to go and ready to do something.
Well, for sure, considerations needs to be made with regards to protective health versus human rights and so on, and how a government responds to concerns of its own people. Dr. Harvey, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have to second those incredibly powerful words, James, that you just said, because I've had this realization for the past 60 years as a political activist. You don't need 100% of the people to put an end to this crap. You just need a bunch of people like us who are resolute. Resolute means we won't take no for an answer. And I'm telling you, it just takes nothing. Nothing has ever been done by the majority. It's the resolute minority that have always fought and won the battles for freedom. Now it's time for us to step up more than ever before. And we all have people in our circle of influence. And fortunately, in my job as a chiropractor, I'm meeting a lot of professional people. I'm talking to attorneys in Kingston. They're not going to take the next shot. They didn't take the COVID shot either. This one attorney friend of mine, he says, we got our whole law firm together when COVID came, and we made a decision we're not going to take that shot. And now these guys have law degrees. And what you were talking about earlier, Fred, these guys know how to go in and, so to speak, yank that coat of arms if that's what it's going to take. I'm going to talk to my lawyer friend this Wednesday about that very idea because, we got to show these people who's boss. They're just kicking us around because they can. Once they realize they can't, the bully in the schoolyard will go away. He'll never punch anybody in the nose ever again.
And perhaps, gentlemen, perhaps that is where we need to go. The idea of and demanding change with the Constitution, change with the government, change with really emphasizing what is true human rights. Final thoughts, gentlemen. Fred, can we start with you?
Sure. Thank you very much for that insight, Dr. Harvey, and thank you very much, James, for outlining it so clearly. And Dr. Harvey said something very interesting just now. It's the top 1%. And he also mentioned that we have to be a few people that are resolute. Well, we're also fighting a very few people that are resolute. And that resoluteness is the 1% at the top, the elite cabal of the Illuminati who are driving this entire fiasco of humanity, this fiasco against humanity. Well, guess what? They haven't bargained on a few resolutes as well. They may not be at the top, but they sure as hell have the ability to kick the entire foundation to pieces. Okay? And that's precisely what we need to do. A few resolute people across the Caribbean region that can stand up and overturn the bargaining table. The same way that our Lord Jesus walked into the temple and overturned the tables of the Pharisees, that is the action that needs to be carried out in the full faith of knowing that what we are doing is being empowered by the positive spirit of soul love for humanity. If we miss that and we don't carry that forward as our standard for what we want to achieve for humanity, we will be doing ourselves and humanity the disservice of allowing the resolute few at the top to achieve their goals. And I just want to categorically say this. That is not going to happen, because this is our Caribbean region. This is our sovereign national territories. And these are our people, not yours.
Fred, Corbin, very much for that. Dr. Harvey, final thoughts?
Yeah, man, I love you guys. You guys are my inspiration. We got to look in the mirror and realize what we are. We are animals. And it's time to start taking a bite out of the people who are coming after us. The way you beat these people, we go after them with a greater force than they're coming after us. I'm telling you, they control us with fear. We can control them with fear. Let's scare the doo-doo out of these people. It's time everybody picks a target Monday morning and starts waking up these people who think they can control us like we're livestock. We are not going to. This is it. This is our final chance to stand and fight, or we're all going to be dead by vaccination.
Thank you so much for that. And finally, James Roguski.
Well, I actually thought I had given my final words, but I'll give a few. I'll give a few more.
We want more.
I'll give a few more. Many people may have heard of Event 201, which was a tabletop exercise, war game simulation that ended up, pretty similar to COVID. They did a very similar thing with monkeypox, and back in 2022, almost to the day from the scenario, is when the first cases of Mpox showed up. Well, in October of 2022, the same group, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Johns Hopkins organization, did another tabletop exercise called catastrophic contagion. And that was set to occur in 2025 in eastern Venezuela, which is really Guyana. And several months ago, there was a lot of ruckus about Venezuela claiming to annex 2/3 of Guyana. And the core reason for that is probably that there's enormous oil and gas reserves in the Caribbean, just north of Guyana. And shifting gears just a little bit, a lot of money coming from the United States' development plans has gone into laboratories and development in the Caribbean region. Well, they claimed that, this was their scenario for early 2025. It was a severe enterovirus, that was going to hit children in eastern Venezuela. So everybody, should be prepared for that. Well, I noticed that they forgot to get the domain name catastrophiccontagion.com. So I snagged it. And so if you want to go and look and see what they have been telling the world is their plan, it appears to be centered on the Caribbean. So y'all better wake up, and you better get together with your allies and get organized so that you can come together and say no, not here, not now, not ever.
I just want to confirm what you're saying there, James, and for your benefit, Kevin. There's a strategic plan that is in place that will be put into action. Okay? Just so you know.
Well, perhaps we should continue this, gentlemen. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming. And for everyone who tuned in and everyone who was participating in the live, we thank you very much. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because the UIC wants to care for you and to show the governance structure that we are here to change, make lives better for the people of Jamaica, and in exchange the world from a global perspective. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It was a pleasure. Truly enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Double fists.
Love it. Love the passion. Thank you, guys. Have a good night. Have a good night, everyone.